a little deeper in that. Because what has happened is there are apps you download, and I'm talking specifically about fintechs app, and there are too many triggers.
Too many notifications.
Too many
Yeah,
notifications.
but not necessarily rewards.
I'll tell you, like, I'll walk you through the journey. So I signed up, saw a free Apple share. I signed up. I'm like, okay, yeah, looking for a trading app. This looks like a great app.
Yeah.
So their growth strategy worked very well. That Apple hook was great. Came into the app. Now they're like, if you do this, if you read one article, then you will get this. If you read, you invite 2 friends, you will get $60 more. If you do this, etc., etc. So within the first 2 days of being on the app, they send me those triggers. Let's call them notifications or triggers, like 5 or 6 different types of triggers, which required me to do actions, which were small in particular, but together, that was a lot of effort.
Right. Which eventually, 2 things are going to happen, right? Well, 3 things could potentially happen. What the company is hoping is that you come back enough times to build a habit on itself.
Yeah.
That's a small number of people. What more oftentimes happen is people turn off your notifications, and the phone OS makers have made it easier than ever, right? Apple and Google have made it easier than ever to just say, stop sending these stupid notifications, which is what I do with almost all these apps.
Yeah.
Or people become blind to notifications. When they have so many notifications, they just ignore all of them. And so we need to be very, very careful with that kind of stuff. And so how do you, I think your question is, how do you send good notifications?
How do you make a balance, right?
So it's about one word. The difference between a notification that feels like spam and a notification that feels like magic is context. Okay, context. And this is why it's so important. I know I've talked about it a lot, why it's so important to understand your internal trigger. And I'll illustrate this with a quick story. I was on a long haul flight, and I was sitting in the aisle seat, and there was a guy in the aisle seat across from me, okay? And this guy was asleep, very clearly. He had a pillow, he was clearly passed out. And the flight attendant comes down the aisle, and she stops, and she looks at him, and she says, "Sir." And he's asleep, he doesn't say anything. So he says it louder, he says, "Sir." Again, he's passed out. Now people are starting to look at her. She says it a third time, loud. She says, "Sir." And he says, what is it? And she says, "Sir, what would you like to drink?" It sounds ridiculous, right? How rude. Did he want to drink? Yes, he wanted a drink, but when he was thirsty, not when he was sleeping.
Yes.
So this is exactly what we're doing. We're doing this in the industry right now to our users by sending them notifications on our schedule.
Right.
Please check. Why? For me, not for the user, but for the company. We invite friends. Why? Why does inviting users benefit me? It doesn't make the product better. I don't want this stupid, $5 incentive. How does it make the app better to invite other people? Yeah. So we are constantly sending notifications on our schedule when it's convenient for us, as opposed to considering when is the user feeling the internal trigger. Yeah. So the closer together you can couple the external trigger with the minute the user feels the itch, that's when it's magic. That's when it's magic. So when you feel stressed, anxious, uncertain, fatigued, whatever the case, that's when you want to send the external trigger. Not just willy-nilly when it's convenient for you to send it, but when you think, where is the user in time and place? And we have this data, by the way.
Yeah.
The users are very willing, if the product gets better by giving us this data, they're happy to tell us, like, here's my calendar access data, location data, there's a million customer preference data. People can tell us things about them that will help us send better notifications that are more likely to be responded to.
No, absolutely. And there is some common sense as well, right? And, but let me tell you, the example you take, that is very common. In fact, I was traveling on SQ. One of the things they let you do now is, if you don't want a mail, you can let them know. They'll put like a small tag and nobody will wake you up. And I have used that so many times.
They don't do that on the American Airlines.
Okay. Yes.
I wish they would.
Yeah, but that is exactly like, how can you be more considerate towards that?
Right. The problem is if you don't think about that in advance and you burn people out, then they turn on that do not disturb permanently. They just say, don't allow any notifications from this company. They unsubscribe. And now we have very little. Then we burn that bridge. It's very hard to get them to turn it back on.
Absolutely. And I think the variable reward is one of the most delicate parts of this whole process, because, you do too many of these, then it is not variable. You do too many similar.
And it's not useful. I think the biggest mistake is that you have to think to yourself, again, back to the internal trigger. That's why it's the first step of the hook model. If you don't understand the internal trigger, you don't know what variable rewards to send. Right? So the variable reward has to scratch the user's itch. So if the variable reward, if the internal trigger is boredom, well, then the variable reward has to entertain. If the internal trigger is loneliness, well, we have to connect people together. If the internal trigger is uncertainty, we have to give people assurance. So the problem is that companies don't realize what psychological itch they're building for, so they send all kinds of notifications. Maybe you'll respond to this, maybe you'll respond to that, as opposed to thinking, wait. What is the internal trigger? What are we scratching here? What's the itch? And only when you know the itch, then you can send appropriate notifications. Then you can offer appropriate variable rewards.
Okay, and